The auction hall was built for noise. Lights burned white and harsh from the ceiling. Metal floors echoed with footsteps, claws, hooves, and tails. Voices overlapped in dozens of alien languages, all filled with hunger, not for food, but for ownership. In the center of the hall stood a single cage. It was taller than the others and reinforced with thick energy bars. Inside the cage stood a human male. The sign above him glowed in cold blue letters. Human male. Class brute. Use labor/combat. To the galaxy, humans were a late-discovered species. Weak ships, old weapons, but strong bodies, too strong. That strength made them valuable and feared. The human stood barefoot on the metal floor. His clothes were torn. Old scars crossed his arms and chest like silent memories. Fresh blood dried near his eyebrow, but his face showed no anger, no fear, just a tired calm. Chains glowed around his wrists and neck, limiting his strength. Without them, the auction masters knew he would be dangerous. A bidder laughed and threw a small metal rod into the cage. It struck the human's shoulder. The crowd laughed louder. Hit him again. Make him kneel. They like pain. The human did not react. He did not move. He simply stared ahead, jaw tight, breathing slow. Long ago, he had learned that reacting only made things worse. To them, he was not a man. He was a thing. Starting bid, the auction master shouted. One human brute, strong bones, high endurance, perfect for mines or arenas. Numbers flew through the air. The human lowered his eyes. He did not want to see who would own him next. Then something changed. A voice rose, not loud, not powerful, but clear. Stop. The word cut through the hall like a crack in glass. The crowd turned. Near the front stood a young alien girl. She was small compared to others, dressed in soft, noble fabrics, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with emotion she did not understand. The auction master frowned. Miss, please step back. She shook her head. Don't hurt the human, she said again, louder this time. Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. Please, just stop. Laughter spread through the crowd. It's a brute, someone mocked. They don't feel like we do. The girl swallowed hard. She looked at the cage. She looked at the human's wounds, at the chains, at the way he stood like someone already broken but refusing to fall. I'll buy him, she said. Silence followed. The auction master blinked. You want that one? Yes, she answered quickly. I'll pay whatever the price is. A noble scoffed. He's dangerous. Another laughed. Humans snap, they kill. Her hands shook, but she lifted her chin. Then call him brute if you want, she said. Just don't hurt him anymore. Inside the cage, the human slowly raised his head. For the first time since the auction began, his eyes focused on someone specific. Her. Their eyes met. She expected hatred, fear, rage. Instead, she saw something far heavier. Endurance. The auction master recovered quickly. Very well, bidding resumes with the young noble's offer. No one else bid, not because they could not, but because suddenly the human no longer seemed amusing. Credits transferred, the cage unlocked. The energy bars faded. Guards raised weapons, tense. The human stepped forward carefully, chains still around his wrists. He towered over the girl now, his shadow falling across her. She forced herself not to step back. You're safe, she whispered, though she did not know if it was true. I won't let them hurt you. The auction master shoved a datapad into her hands. Ownership confirmed, designation remains brute. She hesitated, then looked up at the human. What is your name? She asked softly. The translator hesitated, then activated. My name, the human said in a rough, quiet voice, is Daniel. The master laughed. Doesn't matter, call him brute. The girl shook her head. I won't, she said. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. It was not hope. Hope had died long ago. It was something more painful. The memory of being human, Lyrian led Daniel through the crowded hall, her small hand barely brushing his arm as she guided him past the jeering audience. The humans in her world were rare, almost mythical, and seeing one alive and breathing in front of her made her chest ache. She had bought him. She had saved him. And yet she did not feel powerful. She felt responsible. The guards tried to intervene, unsure how to handle the young noble. "Miss, this is dangerous. He is strong. He could." "He won't hurt anyone," Lyrian interrupted sharply. Her voice was steady now, though her heart hammered in her chest. "He is coming with me, that is all." Daniel walked carefully beside her. His muscles tensed, coiled under the skin, but he did not lash out. He had been trained to survive, to endure, and now, for the first time in months, someone had chosen him, not for his strength, not for what he could do, but for him. The corridor beyond the hall was quieter. Servants scurried to open doors, and the air smelled of polished metals and flowers, an odd mixture that made Daniel pause. He inhaled deeply, unsure if he remembered how to breathe freely. Lyrian noticed the pause. She smiled faintly. "You're safe here," she said. "No one will touch you." Daniel's voice was low, but he managed a few words. "You really bought me." "Yes," Lyrian replied. "You are mine to protect now. I won't let anyone hurt you." He looked at her, searching for mockery, for a trap, for the lie that humans had learned was always waiting. But her eyes were wide and honest. She trembled, yes, but her sincerity was impossible to deny. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to relax a fraction. They arrived at a small room in the eastern wing of her family estate. It was simple, but clean. Soft mats lined the floor, blankets folded neatly in one corner. A small window let in pale light, and for Daniel, it was the first time in months that he felt the warmth of something other than chains and cold metal. Lyrian motioned him inside. "This is your room. You can rest, you can eat, you can do whatever you want." Daniel stepped in cautiously. His large feet made quiet thuds against the floor. He looked around at the space, so small, so ordinary, yet so different from the cage he had been in. He felt something he had not felt in a long time: safety. "You never had a human like me before," Daniel said, his voice almost a whisper. Lyrian shook her head. "No, but I've read about your species. They are strong, enduring, brave, but also lonely, perhaps." She hesitated, unsure how to say it. "I don't want you to be alone anymore." Daniel studied her. He had spent weeks surviving cruelty, pain, and neglect. He had expected more of the same from anyone who approached him, yet here she was, offering him freedom, kindness, and trust. He wanted to believe it, but fear had been his companion for too long. "Food," Lyrian said, breaking the silence. She handed him a plate. Warm, steaming, simple, but it smelled of care. Daniel took the plate slowly. He sat on the floor. For the first time in a long while, he ate without being watched, without tension, without preparing to defend himself. Days passed. Lyrian did not force him to do anything. She gave him clothes, taught him how to move in her home, and shared her meals. She spoke to him about her life, about her world, about the mistakes she had made and the fears she carried. Daniel listened. He did not speak much, but he observed everything: the smallest gestures, the honesty in her eyes, the warmth in her tone. Then came the night when nobles from neighboring houses visited. They mocked him openly, calling him brute and laughing at the size of his muscles. They spilled drinks, pushed him, and whispered that he belonged to her because no one else could tame him. Lyrian stepped in, her small frame became steel. "Touch him again," she warned, "and you answer to House Vale." The nobles sneered, but no one moved. Daniel, watching her, felt something stir inside him. Not anger, not pride, but something foreign and fragile. Someone cared enough to fight for him, to risk themselves for him. After the guests left, Lyrian sat on the floor beside him. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I can't stand seeing anyone hurt you," she whispered. Daniel said nothing at first. Then, in the quiet, he touched her hand lightly. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than words could say. For the first time, Daniel realized something. Maybe humans weren't meant to survive only through strength. Maybe sometimes survival came through connection, through trust, through someone seeing your worth beyond muscles and scars. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel allowed himself to hope. Days passed in quiet routines. Daniel learned the rhythms of Lyrian's home, the soft hum of machines in the background, the way sunlight fell through the high windows, the smell of cooked meals lingering in the air. For the first time in months, he did not count bruises or plan escape. He simply existed. Lyrian did not command him. She did not call him a brute. She spoke gently, asking if he wanted food, or if he wanted to walk in the gardens, or if he wanted to talk. At first, Daniel answered with monosyllables, keeping his voice low, cautious. Humans, he had learned, were too easily broken when they trusted too soon. Yet she persisted. Every day her small gestures chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. A warm meal, a blanket for his shoulders, soft words when the memories of chains haunted him. Lyrian never asked for anything in return, not obedience, not gratitude, not a promise. She only gave. Daniel observed her. She was so young, so small, and yet so determined. Nobles whispered about her foolishness, buying a dangerous human, endangering her family's reputation. But she ignored them. To Daniel, her courage was strange and beautiful. He could not understand why she risked so much for him, but he felt a deep pull toward her, a feeling he had long forgotten. One afternoon, as he walked through the gardens, Lyrian brought him a book. She handed it to him carefully, as though it were a fragile treasure. "You can read it," she said softly, "or just look at the pictures, whatever you like." Daniel took it with both hands, surprised by the gentleness of the gesture. He opened it slowly, flipping pages with care. The pictures showed other humans, strong, smiling, free. Memories stirred inside him, memories of people he had lost, of life before the cages and chains. His chest tightened, but he did not speak. He simply looked, absorbing something he thought he had forgotten, a sense of belonging. Night fell and the estate was quiet. Daniel sat by the window, watching the stars. Lyrian joined him silently, her presence close, comforting. She did not speak, but he felt her attention, her care. It was enough. Then came the nobles. They mocked him openly, calling him brute and laughing at his size, at his scars. One of them spilled a drink across his shoulder, smirking. Another whispered that he was a dangerous animal that she could never control. Lyrian's voice broke through the noise. "Touch him again," she said, her voice firm, shaking but unwavering, "and you answer to House Vale." The nobles froze, unsure how to respond to a girl so small, yet so fearless. Daniel watched her. His heart thudded in a strange rhythm, not fear, not anger, but gratitude and something heavier, something that made his chest ache. After the visitors left, Lyrian sank to the floor, exhausted. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I can't bear seeing anyone hurt you," she whispered. Daniel sat beside her quietly. He had no words, only a heavy silence. Then he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, a gentle gesture that spoke of trust, of recognition, of fragile hope. Days turned into weeks. Daniel began to speak more, his voice returning to its rough, deep tone. He shared small things, memories of home, of work, of battles fought to protect others. Lyrian listened, never judging, never rushing him. She simply listened, and in doing so made him feel human again. One evening, as the sky turned gold, Daniel asked softly, Why do you care so much?" Lyrian looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Because no one should be treated as less than they are," she said. "And because you reminded me what it means to be brave, even when everyone else has forgotten." Daniel stared at her, something unfamiliar swelling in his chest. It was not hope alone. It was trust. It was a quiet warmth, dangerous in its own way because it made him vulnerable. But for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel it fully. He had been a brute, a tool, a thing, but here in her care he was human. And being human felt like a kind of strength he had never known before. The calm of Lyrian's estate did not last. Rumors had spread across the galaxy that a human, strong, dangerous, and now free, was under her protection. The political winds shifted quickly, and House Vale's rivals were not patient. One night the sound of heavy boots echoed through the halls. Metal clanged against stone. Daniel, who had learned to sleep lightly, rose immediately, sensing the danger before the alarms even rang. Lyrian appeared in the doorway, pale but resolute. "They're here for you," she whispered, her voice trembling. They say the council demands the human be taken." Daniel's hands curled into fists. For a long moment he stayed silent. He had been trained to survive, to fight, to endure. But now he felt something foreign, a protective anger, not for himself, but for her. She had saved him. She had given him a room, food, kindness, and now they were taking him back to chains. The doors burst open and soldiers poured in, their uniforms cold and impersonal. Energy restraints glowed in their hands. They moved toward Daniel, who did not resist at first. He stepped back, letting them approach, his eyes locked on Lyrian. "You can't take him," she shouted, standing in front of him. "He's mine." The soldiers paused. One of them raised an energy staff, warning her to step aside. "It's okay," Daniel said quietly, a calmness masking the storm inside. He did not move to defend himself, but his shoulders squared, his height and strength evident even in the dim light. Lyrian's eyes filled with tears. "I bought you, I saved you, don't go." But Daniel let them bind his wrists again. The glowing cuffs hissed as they locked, limiting his strength. He did not struggle. He had learned the hard way that resistance often brought more pain, and he wanted to protect her first. As the soldiers dragged him through the corridors, Lyrian ran beside them, calling his name. Her sobs echoed off the stone walls. "Daniel, I won't let them hurt you. I won't." Daniel looked at her, his chest tightened. "You reminded me," he said quietly, "that I was human." Her tears fell faster, soaking her cheeks. "Stay with me," she pleaded, but the soldiers were relentless. Outside, the cold wind bit at his face. The stars above felt distant, unreachable. He had survived brutality before. He had endured pain and fear, but seeing Lyrian's face, her small, brave face, made him feel something worse than chains, helplessness. Yet inside that helplessness a spark lit. Not rebellion, not hatred, but a quiet promise. He would return to her, he would survive, and he would protect her no matter the cost. The soldiers did not see it in his eyes. They only saw a restrained brute, a dangerous human, a tool waiting to be used again. They did not see the part of him that remembered kindness, that remembered warmth, that remembered a girl who had given him something the galaxy had never offered: trust. As the doors of the transport closed, Daniel's hands clenched within the restraints. His body was bound, but his mind raced. Every step took him further from freedom, but closer to understanding what he fought for. Lyrian collapsed outside the doors, clutching her chest as if it could somehow hold on to him. "I won't give up on you," she whispered. "I promise I won't." And Daniel, locked away from her sight, repeated the promise silently to himself. "I am human, I will survive, and I will return." The chains were strong, but the spark inside him, fueled by her courage and care, was stronger. It burned quietly, steadily, ready to ignite when the time came. Daniel was taken to the council's stronghold, a massive spire of metal and glass that gleamed coldly under distant starlight. Soldiers and officials filled the halls, each assuming that the human, bound and weary, was just another tool, another weapon to be controlled. They did not notice the way his eyes scanned every corner, calculating, measuring, remembering. They did not see the storm gathering beneath his calm exterior. The transport doors opened into a large training chamber. Humans had been studied before, but few had survived to show their true potential. The council wanted proof that Daniel could be subdued, that their decision to return him to custody was justified. "Release the restraints," one officer commanded. Daniel's wrists glowed as the energy cuffs powered down. He flexed his fingers carefully, feeling the tension in his muscles, the memory of pain, the fire of survival. He did not attack immediately. He did not roar. He simply stood, calm and still, his eyes meeting theirs, silent but clear. He was human and he was ready. The first wave of soldiers approached. They were confident, armed with energy staffs and stun devices. Daniel did not flinch. He moved like a predator trained for decades, but with precision that surprised everyone. He did not strike to kill unnecessarily. He struck to disarm, to neutralize, to protect. By the time the first group had advanced, they were already scattered, stumbling, confused by the sheer speed and control of his movements. The council's observers gasped. "Impossible," one whispered. "No human should move like that." Daniel did not listen. His focus was singular: survival and protection. He moved through the hallways, disabling weapons, blocking attacks, and shielding anyone caught in the crossfire who was unarmed. The soldiers expected chaos, but what they found was order, controlled, deliberate, unrelenting. Word spread quickly. By the time reinforcements arrived, Daniel had already reached the civilians who had been used as test subjects. They cowered, frozen in fear, but Daniel guided them gently. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice low and steady. "I will protect you." Aliens who had once laughed at humans began to whisper. Cameras captured him moving like a living shield, his body absorbing blows that would have felled other species twice his size. They recorded him lifting debris to save trapped civilians, carrying them to safety, and moving through fire and smoke without hesitation. When the final officer fell, stunned by his own underestimation, Daniel stood alone in the center of the hall. His chest heaved from exertion, his body marked with cuts and bruises, but his eyes remained calm. No one approached. No one dared. For the first time, the galaxy did not see a brute. They saw a guardian. They saw a human who could endure beyond imagination, who could act with courage and precision when others faltered, and who could protect those who had once dismissed him as property. Daniel did not celebrate. He did not flex his strength. Instead, he lowered himself next to a fallen soldier, checking if he was alive, showing mercy where it had not been expected. His actions spoke louder than any words. Humanity was not just about muscles or survival. It was about choice, compassion, and courage. When the council finally spoke, their tone was hesitant. He is too strong, too controlled, too. Daniel stepped forward. "I am human," he said quietly, his voice carrying over the stunned crowd. "I fight when necessary, I protect when I can, and I remember kindness when it is shown." The words echoed in the hall. Silence followed. For the first time, humans were not tools. Humans were not brutes. Humans were beings capable of greatness, capable of inspiring even those who had once hated or feared them. Daniel's gaze softened as he thought of Lyrian. Her small, trembling hands had bought him, not just from chains, but from despair. Her courage had reminded him of what it meant to be human. She had seen his worth when no one else did. And now, in this hall of power and fear, Daniel had reminded the galaxy. They had forgotten humans once, but he would make them remember quietly and without cruelty. The thing the galaxy had ignored, underestimated, and mocked was standing right there. Alive, unbroken, and profoundly human, Lyrian stood before the council, her hands trembling slightly but her chin held high. The chamber was massive, cold, and impersonal, filled with species from across the galaxy. Every eye was on her, curious, judgmental, skeptical. She could feel their thoughts pressing down, questioning her choices, questioning her wisdom. But she did not falter. Not now. Behind her, on the massive screen, footage of Daniel moved through the chamber. Scenes of him disarming soldiers, lifting debris to save civilians, and moving through chaos with a strange calm played in silence. The council had wanted to prove he was uncontrollable, a danger to everyone. Instead, they saw proof of something they had forgotten: humanity. A stern counselor rose, his voice cold. "Explain why this human, your property, was allowed to act independently, defying council orders. He has caused chaos and embarrassment to this chamber." Lyrian inhaled deeply, her voice steady though soft. "He is not my property," she said, every word cut like a blade. "He is a person. You hurt him and you called him a brute and you tried to take him from me. And yet he protected others. He saved lives that your soldiers endangered. He did not strike for revenge. He did not kill unnecessarily. He acted with humanity." Whispers spread through the chamber. Counselors exchanged uneasy glances. No one had expected words like these from a young noble. "He is dangerous," another counselor said sharply. "Humans are unpredictable. They cannot be controlled." Lyrian shook her head, her tears threatening to fall. "You are afraid," she said. "Afraid because you cannot control him. You called him brute because it is easier than admitting the truth, that humans endure, that they remember kindness, that they can protect those who care for them even when the galaxy would have them destroyed." At that moment, Daniel walked through the doors of the chamber. No chains, no restraints. Every step was deliberate, calm, and controlled. The council froze. Their orders, their authority, meant nothing in the presence of someone who had already survived far more than they imagined. He did not move in front of Lyrian. He stood beside her, a silent shield, not of fear, not of threat, but of solidarity. His eyes swept the room. He was tired, his body bruised and scarred, but his expression held an unyielding calm. "I am human," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "You called me a brute because it was easier than seeing who I am. You thought I could be broken, tamed, or owned. You were wrong. I remember kindness, and I fight for those who show it. That is what humans are worth." The council fell silent. Even the most stubborn members could not ignore the truth in his words. Cameras recorded everything. Witnesses gasped, whispers became murmurs. For a species that had always underestimated humans, this was more than shocking, it was a revelation. Lyrian reached out, lightly touching his arm. His presence beside her was a statement, a proof she had fought so hard to give the galaxy. Together, they were not just a noble and a purchased human. They were a force that reminded everyone that value is not determined by strength alone, but by courage, compassion, and integrity. One elder counselor finally spoke, his tone grudging but respectful. "Perhaps we have been wrong about humans. Perhaps it is not control they need, but respect." Lyrian nodded slowly. Her tears fell freely now, not from fear, but from relief and pride. Daniel's presence beside her made every risk, every tear, every moment of doubt worth it. "I bought him," she said softly, more to herself than to the council. "Not to own him, but to protect him. And in protecting him, he reminded me what it means to care, to trust, and to be human." Daniel's hand brushed hers gently, a quiet acknowledgement. No words were necessary. They had endured the cruelty of the galaxy and come out unbroken. He was no longer her property. He was no longer a brute in the eyes of anyone. Together, they were a symbol. The galaxy could underestimate humans, mock them, and call them weak, but they could never erase their strength. And for the first time, the council understood. Some things, no matter how small, cannot be controlled, tamed, or owned. Humanity was not just muscle or endurance. It was courage, loyalty, and the ability to stand for what is right, even against a galaxy that refused to see it. Lyrian's voice trembled but rang clear. "He is human, he is free, and he deserves every chance that we, as a species, have too long denied him." Daniel nodded silently, standing beside her, the living proof that compassion and courage could change the galaxy. The council chambers were quiet now, the weight of what had happened settling over every member like a heavy fog. The screen still showed Daniel in action, his calm, controlled movements, his protection of the innocent, his refusal to strike when unnecessary. They had underestimated humans for centuries, and now the truth was undeniable. The galaxy began to change slowly. Decrees were issued. Human slavery was abolished. No longer could humans be treated as tools or property. Not because everyone had suddenly grown kind, but because they were afraid of the strength, courage, and endurance that humans possessed when they were free to act as themselves. Daniel refused to take titles or honors. He refused to be paraded as a hero or weapon. He had survived cruelty and chains, but his heart had not hardened. He wanted only to live, to protect, and to be human. And now he would live on his terms. Lyrian stayed by his side. She did not command him, she did not own him. They were equals, partners in a quiet, unspoken bond forged through pain, trust, and understanding. Her courage had saved him once, and his strength had reminded her what it meant to fight for something truly important. Together, they were more than human and alien. They were a symbol of something greater, hope. Children would ask about the first human to be freed from chains. Citizens and soldiers alike would whisper of the human who had stood against the galaxy's cruelty and saved lives in ways no one expected. And the story always began the same way. In a loud, cruel auction hall, a small alien girl had stood up and said, "Don't hurt the human, I'll buy him." Daniel, once called brute, smiled quietly now, remembering the girl's wide, determined eyes. He had been called a tool, a weapon, a monster, but she had seen something more. And he had survived, not for glory, not for power, but for someone who had dared to believe in his worth. Years later, he and Lyrian would walk through peaceful gardens in her estate. Daniel carried no weapons. Lyrian carried no fear. They spoke softly, laughed easily, and sometimes just sat together, watching the sun set over distant stars. Humanity, once ignored and mocked, had a place in the galaxy, not because anyone had given it, but because it had proven itself, quietly and with integrity. Daniel looked at Lyrian and said nothing. Words were not necessary, she understood. They had endured cruelty, injustice, and misunderstanding. They had faced the galaxy together, and in each other they had found something rare: respect, trust, and a quiet, unshakable connection. The galaxy learned a lesson it would not forget. You could call a human brute if you wanted. You could chain him, mock him, or underestimate him. But if someone treated him like a person, truly like a person, he would endure, he would protect, and he would stand taller than anyone ever expected. Lyrian touched his arm lightly, smiling. "You're not a brute," she whispered. "You never were." Daniel looked at her, and for the first time in his life he felt completely at home. He was free, he was human, and he was valued, not for his strength alone, but for the heart and courage that had survived everything. And that was worth more than the galaxy could ever measure. The auction hall, the chains, the fear, they were all gone now. What remained was simple, pure, and unbreakable: trust, respect, and the enduring power of humanity. In a galaxy that had tried to erase it, Daniel and Lyrian proved one thing: humanity could not be owned, feared, or defeated. It could only be recognized, and when it was, it could change everything. The story ended not with war or blood, but with a quiet truth that echoed across worlds. Sometimes, saving one human changes a galaxy.